Hello, everybody. This is Jay Onwuka, the host, creator, etc., of Nearzone Magazine. And today I'm just going to, I guess, take, I don't know if you could call it a break. I've got like 5 videos up so far. But essentially, I haven't been putting up videos with the kind of frequency that I would like. So I had something already written up, so I figured I would just read it out for you guys and hope that you like it. I actually just put out a zine recently. It's called Sumanguru. You can check it out on my website, www.nearzone.com. There's links up there. You can also go to a Patreon that I just set up. Not expecting too much out of it right now, but if you do sign up for $5 there, you will get a copy mailed to you. And if you sign up for $1, you can just get the digital copy. And if you want it for free, there's information on my website for how you can email me, or I could just tell you right here, requests@nearzone.com. Send me an email there and put Sumanguru zine request in the subject line so that I will get it, and I will send you a digital copy of the zine. It's got adventure stories and stuff in it, and I think it's really good. I've got art from K. Thor Jensen on the cover, and I think he's really awesome. So yeah, go check it out. And so what I'm going to be reading for you is actually a piece that I ended up having to put in there myself. And it is a description of one of the characters that is involved in the setting that has the Orium Mystery video attached to it. So this being shows up a little bit later in the story of that video, and only for a little bit. But this is more of like an NPC description if you're playing a role-playing game. And you want somebody to sort of set in there as a villain, or as a helper for a villain, or even as, somebody that the player characters interact with positively, depending on where each side is in the arrangement. So what I'm going to present here is actually the long version of what I put into the zine, because I wanted to save some space in the zine, so I cut it down a bunch, and I also removed some of the context and stuff like that. But I'm going to give you all the context, all the juicy details here. So with all that said, sit back and relax for Drenless, the Arch-Succubus. The one called Drenless might be your death the moment her name enters your mind. Some call her the Poison Duchess, and others call her the Sunset Viper. Those are the ones that know her. She's no deity and has no powers beyond those of an archmage, which is not uncommon for those who travel the many planes. Also, she isn't a hateful being in her core. Like all her kind, she wants to be desired more than anything else. And that is what makes her dangerous. Most will never know of her presence, but those who do know her can attest to her peerless cunning. She can make anyone dance to whatever tune she likes, into her arms or into a knife. Well, almost anyone. We'll come to that shortly. What follows is a profile of the incarnate being called Drenless. We'll start with a description, then go to a summarized history, then details on encounters with her, and we'll finish with possible ways you might come across her path. Description. Drenless is a procubus, a kind of incarnate that is sustained by being desired. Incarnates are beings like angels and demons who don't live and die the way that mortal beings do. Importantly, rather than having to eat and drink to keep themselves alive, incarnates need a form of sustenance that can be more metaphysical. As said before, for procubi, this sustenance comes in the form of being desired. However, procubi don't need to harm those that desire them in order to get that sustenance. In other words, they don't have to feed off of creatures to live. Instead, think of them as creatures who are powered by the warmth sitting next to a fire. As long as the fire keeps giving off heat, they can be content. Procubi can be very dangerous because of this need to be desired, however, as more reckless procubi can go to great lengths to generate desire in others. As a progeny, the procubi are without gender. Procubi are consummate shapeshifters and tend to take forms that are very attractive, as well as matching the procubus's own personality. Usually, procubi end up tending towards either a masculine or a feminine form, even if changing to impersonate different kinds of creatures. Drenless has, with one known exception, been in a feminine form for her whole existence, and so is considered a succubus or female procubus, but she would have no trouble assuming a masculine or other gendered form if she wished. Along with their polymorphing abilities, procubi are stereotyped as conniving and mercenary. They can gain the desire they need either from one being or from many. Most procubi don't require a lot of desire to sustain themselves, but in the way that some people enjoy eating for the taste of food or the feeling of fullness, some procubi seek more than they strictly need. Sometimes this does appear to be a form of draining, as a procubus makes another being desire them to a self-destructive extent. This behavior is most common in adolescent procubi, aged between 100 and 300 of our years, who need more sustenance than those older or younger. Drenless is a mature procubus of several millennia, which is not considered elderly by procubi. The form which she is known in now is one that she most likely developed during the Stygian War, though it's impossible now to know exactly when she came to it. She appears as a tall and shapely female anthropoid. She's sure to stand at least a head above any mortal she meets or anyone she wants to overawe, and just slightly shorter than anyone she is inferior to. She is smooth-skinned and hairless, except for her head, which is adorned by a mass of thin tendrils that appears to be hair that hangs down to her shoulders, as if it were expertly trimmed. She often had a pair of horns sprouting from her head. Her skin was colored black, white, dark blue, gold, or bronze based on her choice at the time. With demons, she went unclothed as they did, but she put on the form of elegantly cut but single-colored dresses among those that clothed themselves. She also had 6 arms, 3 on each side of her body, which is likely in imitation of the Fury demons. History. Drenless was created fully formed during the era of cycles by an elder incubus called Yomenoth, using the seed of a lung, which is a kind of incarnate which some call serpent dragons, with a very potent captured soul. She first saw existence in the Rejoicing District, capital of the Procubi and seat of the ineffable god being called the Prince of the Desired, where her father Yomenoth was an acolyte of the potentate. She too began her life as an acolyte, but she was unlike her father in many ways. She was only decades old when she began venturing out to explore the wider city plain of Shalagoon. Soon, she left her duties in the Rejoicing District altogether. Some say that she was just 50 years old when she traveled to the lower plains and enlisted in the Stygian War. Since almost the beginning of time, the demons of Kala and the psychic empires of Hell have brawled with one another in the Stygian War. It gets its name from the river Styx, the only reliable means for fiends of the lower planes to travel from one plane to another. Some also call it the Infernal War, the Eternal War, or the Blood War. Procubi have been used by both sides of the conflict in the past, and Drenless was at first just one of many recruiters used to draw powerful allies, such as mortal summoners, to their employers. After decades of developing and applying her talents, she became the personal recruiter and consort of the Titan Vit-Zakakiel, despot of a minor psychic empire. Though Zakakiel's influence grew with her at his side, Drenless became dissatisfied with his ambition. Soon she betrayed him on behalf of his subordinate Vit-Masak, allowing Masak to rise to the position of despot, while Drenless retained her position as first consort. Though despots controlled these psychic empires, they were not the emperors. That role is always filled by a reclusive being called a Zlizden, who mentally dominates most of those under its control. Vit-Masak's emperor, and Zakakiel's before him, was known as Kikindojit, the Dream's Eye, as ancient as most of their kind was. Though some procubi were given the title Vit, most were not, for the simple reason that only those who were under Aslizdin's control could have that title. Procubi are very resistant to mental control, and Kikindojit was unable to dominate Drenless. Most assume that, for this reason, Drenless and the Kikindojit came into conflict. No one truly knows why Drenless abandoned Masak. It's only known that she did. Sometime after Masak's rise, a long enough time for any enmity to take root, Drenless betrayed Vit Masak on the field of battle. Instead of simply defecting to another Titan, however, she allowed Masak's forces to be slaughtered at Zokino Brek by the demon horde of Nagamunz the Bone Smasher. She then became Nagamunz's consort and led to his great successes, only to allow him to be consumed by another prince better than him. For millennia, Drenless shifted her allegiances from one demon prince to another, or to a Titan, or a Rakmaya merchant baron, anyone who could best serve her wish for power and thus desire. Though most procubi did little more than recruit, Drenless soon distinguished herself as a master of intrigue and subterfuge. She became her partner's sickle, weeding their ranks of malcontents. However, she fostered those seditious voices which she could use personally, a point which was rarely recognized by her consort until it was too late. Her reputation as an indispensable operative opened up new possibilities for her. She became not just a watcher for sedition, but a magnet for it. Enemies of her partner came to her in order to clear their plans or to have them rebuffed. She was adept, not only at eliminating such risk-takers, but also at keeping enough threats in the air that her partner could never feel secure. The period known as the Horde Era began when the Gates of Vengeance were opened on the mortal worlds of Sengir and Thos, allowing demons to invade and rend apart their civilizations. Rather than join the many princes who sought that glory, Drenless saw an opportunity to become master of Kala. At the time, she was attached to the Titan Vit Kalanaya, another incarnate of considerable power. Her maneuverings pushed Kalanaya to reach Thos, where Kalanaya and her force of devils would be crushed. Drenless allied herself with the demon who had defeated Kalanaya, the demon Prince Gavode, and soon her influence sent Gavode back to Kala itself. He soon embroiled himself in a war among demon princes over a newly discovered merc pool, a sort of infernal soup with mutative powers. As soon as her presence was known, however, the war became as much about Drenless's services as it was about the initial goal. In this confused contest, she left Gavode's side, and by its end came to back the archdemon known as Pazuzu. This began one of the most legendary relationships in the eternal history of Kala. At the time Pazuzu had secured the merc pool, he was known only as the Prince of the Lower Plague Winds, and he did not assume a new title with this victory. Instead, he waited for many years, building his power with Drenless's help. The Horde era ended when the Archons of Thos closed the Gates of Vengeance and banished the fiends from the mortal plane. Eventually, Pazuzu did take other titles such as Lord of Starvation and Prince of the Wastes. Though many continued to call him simply Lord of the Lower Plague Winds, he made that title a fearsome one in its own right. It is said that Pazuzu is one of the most gifted warriors in all existence, a match for avatars and even gods were he to escape the lower planes. With a mind like Drenless to organize his coalition, Pazuzu rapidly amassed new allies and led them to victory on the battlefield. The greatest title of all had lain dormant for thousands of years, ever since Uilia, an avatar of the Lord of Discipline, destroyed his previous holder Prince Dogon. Now, as the preeminent demon among the many millions, Pazuzu dared to take this title and call himself Prince of Demons. Yet despite all this power, no one, not even Pazuzu, could deny that Drenless was instrumental to his power. Without her, Pazuzu would never be able to keep the hundreds of chiefs in line, even though he could easily defeat them all in single combat. But instrumentality does not mean desire, and, for Drenless, this gap widened every year. As Pazuzu became the undisputed greatest of all demons, Drenless moved further into the background. Pazuzu appeared to ignore her, and she was left out of important matters, such as where the Horde would seek next to destroy. So, as was her way, Drenless began to scheme against her consort, bringing discontented chiefs and ambitious associates together in order to overthrow Pazuzu. Pazuzu was different from all the others, however, and Drenless found that her attempts were always thwarted. In one memorable attempt, Drenless executed a double ploy which, on one hand, brought her the potent Gideon ring, and on the other, elevated Belong the Prince of Grief to the point where he claimed the title of Prince of Demons as well. This forced a battle between Belong and Pazuzu, a battle that provided cover for Drenless's escape. Using the sight-obscuring powers of the Gideon ring, Drenless crossed the battle lines, only for Pazuzu to sweep down personally and seize her back. Despite all her planning, Pazuzu appeared to be one step ahead. He never made a move without considering first how he would keep Drenless imprisoned. Belong was, of course, smashed and annihilated. Pazuzu allowed Drenless to keep the ring, a condescension which always rankled Drenless. Some supposed that all Drenless wanted was to get Pazuzu's attention, and that was the real reason she never really left. There are those who still think this. However, though Drenless did remain for Pazuzu for thousands of years, she did eventually find her way free. The path she found was dropped into her lap by the scrupulous guild of armsmiths. In particular, a dwarf archmage called Emodek Ironbender seems to have been at the root of her freedom. The armsmiths dealt magical weapons to both sides of the Stygian War. Emodek had personally dealt with Pazuzu several times. Therefore, when Emodek asked Pazuzu for Drenless's help, Pazuzu was happy to make a trade. Drenless also agreed once Emodek spoke with her. The deals which Emodek gave to Drenless and to Pazuzu were, however, different. Both were told that Drenless was to seduce a genie of the Honorable Guild, but Pazuzu was not told what Emodek had offered to Drenless. In point of fact, it is not known exactly what Drenless was offered. We only really know what happened. Drenless traveled to Shalaguun, where she engaged the attention of Rasharan the Tremendous. It is widely supposed that she put Rasharan in the state of mind to hand the Kalian Orium, which was an artifact capable of altering the planes themselves, over to Emodek, who then took it to the deity called the King in Gold. As his reward, Emodek was made into a semi-deity called Umenhotep. Drenless's prize was not as great, but it achieved something that she had not been able to do so far. She vanished almost completely, from Shalaguun, from Kala, but most importantly, from the scrying of her captive consort, Pazuzu. For over a century, no one at all knew of Drenless's whereabouts. Rumors of her resurfacing came to the knowledge of those who cared to know eventually. She appeared to be plagued by the agents of Pazuzu who had been scouring the multiverse to recapture her, but she always kept ahead of them. Predictably, without Drenless to keep sedition in check, Pazuzu's Horde alliance crumbled. Some chiefs deserted and rivals grew bolder. Though Pazuzu remained unbeaten, his chiefs and their warbands were consuming less and less as they were opposed at every corner. They eventually forced Pazuzu to stop claiming the title Prince of Demons so that no one could be offended by his arrogance any longer. Pazuzu accepted this humiliation, but only with an eye to recovering his power. For that reason, he could never leave Drenless alone. At some point during this time, it is very likely that Drenless established herself on the mortal water world of Kundanatu. Since the planar chaos of the Great Breaking, Kundanatu had come under a global alliance united for their mutual respect for an oracle called the Aplavoka. At one point, a rival oracle emerged who was known as the Bodina. For 50 years, the Bodina challenged the Aplavoka's authority, but she was finally defeated by a band of Aplavokite mages and mystics, who banished her from the mortal plane entirely. From accounts given of the Bodina's behavior and appearance, the resemblance of this character to Drenless's own is uncanny. Next, we are nearly sure that Drenless re-emerged on Shalaguun, only this time as a male giant archmage and merchant known as Arnlif. At the time of her return to the city plane, the Bountiful district had already been swallowed by a rift, and panic was high about losing more of the plane. These planar rifts were a result of the Great Breaking and were made worse by the so-called Orium mystery, which Drenless had taken part in. Arnlif joined the Honorable Guild and proved himself to be an able trader, especially in captured souls, and gained the friendship of many others within the guild. He began to spread word about an extreme solution to the rifts, a spell known as the Solik filter. Though this was not the main purpose of the spell, and though the spell had a great cost, Arnlif had proposed the only solution which did not involve going to war against the King in Gold to recover the Orium. The Honorable Guild then did two momentous things. First, it established a Minister of Slaughter. Second, it put its trust in Arnlif. The Solik filter was created primarily as a weapon which would oversaturate reality, so to speak, disorienting others and disrupting magic. Yet, Arnlif proposed it could be used to reinforce reality, strengthening the plane against further tears. To bring it about, however, would require the consistent sacrifice of living incarnate beings. Unlike mortals whose souls exist in an afterlife, the death of an incarnate is once and forever. The guild called the person in charge of this grisly task the Minister of Slaughter, so that it would always have to confront what it was doing. But it did proceed with casting the spell. This time of influence on Shalagu'un was threatened by the arrival of the College of Solidity to the city. Primarily made of mortals who wished to rectify the Orium mystery, the college's interests spread widely, and they became interested in the Solik filter. They viewed the spell as crude and cruel, though they did confirm that it was effective. Over time, the college's arguments and their scrutiny of Arnlif began to sway some other guild merchants. Arnlif was not without his own spies, and he soon discovered just how deeply the college's suspicions ran. It's known that the college certainly believed Arnlif was Drenless in a new guise, though it was never proven. Arnlif disappeared before it could be. To this day, the Solik filter remains in use on Shalagu'un, but nowhere else. At this time, Drenless appears to have formed two primary ambitions. First, her ultimate goals were now based on Shalagu'un. Her desire to become master of the city plane would not be hidden, though she usually expressed a wish just to be a kind of prince of the honorable merchants, similar to a demon prince over their horde, or to found a guild for procubi. Second, her most urgent issue was that of mortal arrogance. She believed firmly that mortals, who had been so impudent as to resist her domination, must all be ruled as the slaves of incarnates. Organizations such as the College of Solidity and the Sympathetic had lifted mortals above their station. But, more than those emotional drives, it was apparent to her now that she would never succeed in her ambitions unless she could leash or destroy mortal power across the planes. Even this, though, has probably fallen somewhat in the light of her need to deal with one specific mortal, the Draken Archmage Mukawid's Hazazir, a member of the college. Drenless had established herself in the Shadow Plane as a lurer and dealer of souls, even doing good business with the Honorable Guild. At first, she had only the Defenders of the Dead, a group dedicated to protecting wandering souls, to deal with, and she drove a wedge between two clans of Davaya which were well represented in the Defenders. Over time, the College of Solidity pressured the Honorable Guild to stop trading with Drenless. Without the support of the Honorables, Drenless prepared to leave, only to be accosted by Hazazir in person. They then dueled on the arid, lightless flatlands of Shadow. Hazazir would flee this battle, but Drenless was wounded enough that most who knew of it would mark this a draw. Sometime after that, Drenless herself left the Shadow Plane. It is said that Drenless is now on the mortal world of Valbar, playing consort to the invading titan Vit Gomiel. Mukawid's Hazazir has apparently also heard this rumor and has arrived on the world, rallying those standing against Gomiel's forces. Undoubtedly, Hazazir hopes to defeat Drenless, but it isn't known why she wants to do so. It is impossible to predict Drenless's next move, but it is very probable that Gomiel will not survive it. Confronting Drenless. Drenless is an extremely formidable combatant, but she is arguably even more dangerous in the arena of politics. She has a talent for cultivating agents and informants, for giving gifts and engineering blackmail, and for striking first. Usually, she's made herself indispensable to powerful interests in the area, so simply attacking her will present a series of complications for her assailant. She is also most often surrounded by servants of some kind who are always ready to give their lives in her defense. The number of favors she can call upon run into the thousands. She's only been defeated to this point by a sudden, overwhelming attack from those she had no power over, or by maneuverings which make her position impossible to hold. Trying to face her within a community that she's established in will only lead to ruin. If fighting her personally, one has to contend with an array of abilities. As an arcane mage, she isn't of overwhelming power. She would not be considered an archmage, just on that alone. However, her skill in application comes from her eons of practice. Magical traps and pre-planned tactics are always on her mind, and she is adept at marshalling her environment to her advantage. Her natural abilities as a procubus allow her to cloud the minds of others and to impart suggestions. She's been known to disarm even hardened assassins sent after her throat. Though some are able to withstand her mental claws, these are then brought low by her exceptional fighting ability, the product of her many millennia in the Stygian War, assaulting her enemies and learning from her consorts. She typically fights in whatever form she is in or in her Stygian form, but her polymorphing ability also allows her to outmove most of her opponents. The Gigian ring in her possession is a strange artifact. It appears to hide the user from any kind of outside perception. Sight, hearing, scrying, even touch gives no actual feel. The only way that one can be noticed is by smell, as this appears to involve invisible particles that separate from the body and their presence, which is to say that they can't be walked through by another body. It works whenever the wielder wants it to work. As with most artifacts, its full abilities are not known. However, it is believed that Drenless has owned the ring longer than anyone else, so if anyone does know its deeper secrets, it is most likely her. Relationships. The College of Solidity. This gang of mortal busybodies earned Drenless's hatred when they drove her from Shalagu'un, if we accept that she was also Arnlif, and cemented it when they helped turn the Honorable Guild away from trading with her. They, in turn, hate Drenless for helping bring about not only the increase in planar rifts, but also the demise of the college's previous association, the venerable Sympathetic. Scholomance. The infernal successor of the Sympathetic is Scholomance, Academy of the Arcane located in Hell. Drenless has had some minor dealings with Scholomance and remains on cordial terms. The Honorable Guild. Drenless's reputation is dubious among the Guild of Soul Traders. Over a quarter of the membership believes that Arnlif and Drenless are one and the same. However, roughly half, including some who believe the theory, don't view it as a matter of consequence. The Guild in general does respect Arnlif, if grimly, for bringing them the Solik filter spell. The Brilliant Banners. The legions of angels and sphinxes are very hostile to Drenless, a relic of her time spent aiding both the Psi empires and the demon hordes in the Stygian War. The Order of Vigilant Watch. Gang of mortal busybodies actually best describes the Vigilants, who are not archmage scholars but instead several potentates of mortal worlds who move only to protect their own holdings. They see Drenless much as the College and the Banners do, with suspicion and hostility. The Defenders of the Dead. Since the Great Breaking, souls have not been able to move to their resting places, trapping them on the Shadow Plane where soul harvesters can easily snatch them. The Defenders fight these traitors, protecting souls until such a time as they can cross the planes again. This army loathes Drenless for her time spent weakening them and exploiting the stranded. Demonic Hordes. While Drenless is respected and feared by many chiefs and princes, those demons who remain loyal to or friendly with Pazuzu are her most pressing enemies. It's on Pazuzu's account that Drenless avoids any travel to the lower planes. Psychic Empires. As with the demons, most of the Titan despots and their subjects have a wary respect for Drenless. The Zlizden creatures who rule as emperors, however, detest her for her resistance, both psychic and political, to their influence. Possible encounters. Seeking Arnlif. The Arnlif mystery has been a topic of discussion among the informed of Shalagu'un ever since Arnlif's disappearance. The run of events since has kept the college too busy to investigate, but there are many who would be interested to know what has happened to the giant, either to wish him good or to do him ill. Rumors of another being whose rise was as fast as Arnlif's, about 50 years to the peak of their influence, may put one on the trail of the elusive being. Pazuzu's Bounty. As a demon and a fiend, Pazuzu and his agents cannot plane shift the way most incarnates can, keeping them on the lower planes. Many princes chance themselves through planar rifts, but many more of these have fallen than have created new feeding lands. Pazuzu himself never leaves his home plane for fear of losing even more power to misfortune. However, someone who can bring Drenless to him would undoubtedly gain a priceless favor. The Defender Clans. two clans of Daveya, sometimes called Enlightened Ones, which had been integral to the Defenders, are now in a blood feud over an interclan love that ended in tragedy. This was known to be engineered by Drenless, yet the Daveya involved still blame one another for their parts in it. The Defenders are incapable of protecting anyone so long as this feud persists. Solving it would be the ideal solution, but that would likely require bringing Drenless to account before the Defenders, a proposition which he is not likely to agree to. And that is everything about Drenless that I've written up so far. I guess for one of my own characters, it is a little tough for me to sort of get really into them, and I usually do. Eventually the characters that I write for a long time, I get really into. But usually when I sort of create a one-off character to fill a role in a story, I don't expect to get attached to them so much, but for some reason I really sort of latched on to the character of Drenless, and I probably will make her more integral to sort of, the whole machinations of this story setting. So I know this isn't a setting that's based on anything. This is just my personal, I guess, homebrew setting. But I hope you guys enjoy. I hope this was at least interesting for you to listen to. Usually when I do videos, they're mostly gonna be me in sort of a character, not necessarily doing a bit, but I'll be speaking as if, this is a real thing, kind of, right? But because this was just supposed to be a not as fully planned out video, I was just reading text that I had. I figured I would present it with some bookending here. So again, thanks for listening. Hit the like button, subscribe. If you'd like to support me, you can go to patreon.com/nearzone, or you can go to my website, nearzone.com, or you can check me on Twitter. I am at WriteJ on Wooka. I'll put it somewhere here. And yeah, thanks.